Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Shadle, and I'm here to talk to you about your lab results. If you just got those results, you may be dazed, you may be confused, you may be upset, or just disappointed. Whatever the case, let's go over the basic data together. You know, you are not defined by your lab value. That's the first thing I want to get off my chest at the very beginning. Because oftentimes we think that with a bad lab result that we're bad, or that we're going to die in the next 2 weeks or 1 year or whatever. We just don't see it as good at all. But actually, what we need to do with these lab values is realize that they are just a snapshot in time. And we need to look at trends. So it often takes us, for most of our lab values, several lab values over time, maybe every 6 months, or every 3 months, every year. And then we can adjust what our lifestyle choices are and be able to see how they impact our lab over time. Another concept I'd like to discuss is this issue of normal versus optimal when it comes to interpreting your lab data. In fact, most of our lab values really are in that category of normal versus abnormal. These would be like electrolytes. So we study a population, every lab does that, and we get a bell curve, 2 standard deviations above or below is considered abnormal, and it's abnormal because in those ranges, the 2 standard deviations above or below, you can actually die if your electrolytes are not in balance. However, things like cholesterol, we should really think of as optimal versus less than optimal. Because if you think about it, you take a population that has a really high cholesterol level, you're looking at a population that has an increased risk for heart disease. At that point, you don't want to be normal, you want to be optimal. And so when we look at total cholesterol in the Pathways to Health and Wellness, we believe that, based on epidemiologic studies, that a total cholesterol of under 180 is optimal. That means you have decreased your risk for heart disease as much as you can by diet and lifestyle choices. When we look at HDL, we realize that HDL is a little different, and that's the good cholesterol versus LDL, which is the bad cholesterol. So when we look at HDL cholesterol, that is primarily genetically determined. And so an HDL over 40, and the higher the better, is considered protective against heart disease, whereas LDL is the bad cholesterol. That's what causes or gets stuck in your arteries and develops plaque. And what we have found, again, in the Pathways to Health and Wellness, with epidemiologic studies across the world, a level under 90 is safe, or at least optimal. And if you are taking a statin, you would want, with multiple studies in this country, a level under 70. When it comes to triglycerides, it's pretty clear that a triglyceride level under 150 is optimal for reduction of heart disease. These are fats that are just floating around in your bloodstream, and it is a result of the fat that you eat. But one thing that we fail to realize sometimes is it's the sugar intake as well. And so with triglycerides, if we drink even a fluid that we would consider healthy, like a fruit juice, that can cause spikes in triglyceride as well as in your sugar levels. And so what we find with triglycerides is that's a measurement over just a couple of days, and drinking too much juice even the day before can definitely influence your triglycerides, whereas your cholesterol is really over the course of a couple of weeks. We go down to blood pressure, and blood pressure fluctuates certainly, but over time, and we define blood pressure, high blood pressure, as 3 measurements over the course of at least a couple of weeks in different types of situations, and that will give us a more accurate view of blood pressure that is definitely impacted by your salt intake, which remember is we primarily get our salt in this country from processed foods, and of course the fat. When we look at A1C, that's hemoglobin A1C, that is a marker over the past 3 months of a person's sugar intake and how much sugar gets accumulated there in that hemoglobin A1C. That's what we measure. And so the value above which we would say you really want to control that sugar level more and really look at a long-term strategy is 6.5% and above would be something that we'd say, let's work on that together. Now that I've given you these optimal numbers, what do you do with the values that you have? Let's say, for example, that you do have all optimal numbers. What does that mean for you? Does that mean you're perfectly healthy and you can do anything you want? Of course not. These lab values are just snapshots in time. And though I'm happy that they're optimal, there are very many other determinants of health that we need to look at. But now what about those of us who do not have optimal levels? And we look at that lab value and we say, wow, what am I going to do? Well, let me give you some suggestions. Some of us may need to make some radical changes. Maybe we haven't made the changes that we need to yet, and we've just kind of been putting it off, and it may take some serious look at the choices that we're making and how we can change those choices so that they are optimal choices that could lead to optimal lab values. Some of us, however, have worked as hard as we think that we can. We've cut out as much sugar and processed foods, and we're eating whole food, and we feel like we're doing well, and we just can't get that next step. Well, I would say work with your physician, number one, and develop a plan of action on what you might need to do. And maybe there are some medications or other things that you would need to do in order to get optimal levels. And then there are some of us that have genetics such that we may always live with suboptimal levels. If we're being honest with ourselves and we've done everything we can, that's when I say, don't let this define who you are. There is more to life than a lab value. There's more to life than any diagnosis that we can have. In fact, it's our relationships that we have that really make the difference in our lives. It's what we believe, how we treat others. Those are the things that really make us who we are. And yes, we want to be physically healthy as well. And we just need to be honest where we are in that journey and what we need to do in conjunction and in consultation with our physician. So I hope this has been helpful, and we are here to journey with one another as we try to figure out how we can each one have optimal health.